And that's why you should never try to tape a rabbit to your feet. This is Wednesday, October 3rd, with the advanced class. We're going to get into our story called The Lottery, which is a story. You have turned in book report, so if you're not here today, then you should hopefully be giving me a book report. And if you're not here, you can find this story on my website, and then you can follow along with us, or just listen to my melodic voice. You guys, once again, do not have a quiz coming up on Friday. Instead, you guys are going to have a really long story that's going to test your ability to be smart. And so we're going to do this thing where we talk to each other and have discussions and reading things. It is much like today's story is memorable. Friday's story is memorable. As I told you, we sort of end with a whole bunch of stories that are memorable at the end. That is definitely where we're going.
Oh, no.
And so Friday's is longer, but definitely worth it.
Is there a Brovicast?
As we get into this one, first off, with our story, we're going to get to what's called suspense, our last thing that we're going to be adding to our list. What is... I don't think it's on the thing. I need to check to see. I don't think it is.
No, it's not.
I don't think so. I thought we filled them all in. This is the last thing you kind of have to know. What is suspense?
It's a scary thing that kind of keeps you on a cliffhanger. You never know what's going to happen, then you die.
Back and watch the video.
It's like the creepy part where things
Suspense would be
So, suspense, whenever someone's reading the book or you're watching the TV show and it goes to commercial, what are commercials? Is when you're not watching it on Netflix. And so it's the thing that makes you want to keep reading or want to keep watching in some way or another. What part of the mountain does that happen?
The rising action.
Nicely done. So that's going to happen in the rising action section. So that's where that comes in. Let's see. From there, we're going to need to talk about traditions real quick, because it's going to be popping up in our story. What I have up there is, what traditions does your family have? Do you have anything you ever eat? So, with traditions, knowing what a tradition is and why you do traditions are important. So, usually traditions are connected to holidays and some kind of thing. As in, for us, we have one coming up for Halloween. What is the down, my eager people willing to learn on a Wednesday? What is our tradition we have for Halloween?
You sit at home and watch TV so you don't put her outside.
With our Halloween traditions that you guys seem to be super excited about, the question that goes along with it is, do you know why we dress up and why we go around people's houses?
Because it's tradition.
Now,
Because orange juice.
that was my fault. I did not mean for you guys to all yell at me at once. Now, a lot of times, one, I don't want you all yelling at me. Hashtag not surprising. Most of you have no idea why we do it. For the honest part of it, we don't know why we do it. Now, I've heard any number of theories, but they're all theories. Whether it goes back to Quaker times, whether it goes back to pilgrims, whether it goes to keeping away demons, those aren't actual reasons. Those are things that people just come up with now. We're really not quite sure why it started from any number of different things that sort of got combined. What's important is, does it matter to you why it started? No. Does it matter to you why it keeps happening?
Yes.
No. What's the only thing that's important to you? The only thing that's important to you is that it happens. If people were to say, you can't get candy unless you can answer these 10 questions about Halloween, you're like, what? No, I don't, just give me the candy. And they're like, and the costumes, that's also kind of fun because I want to be a princess. And so what's important to you is just the fact that it happens. Same thing with most holiday traditions. As far as Christmas goes, I mean, for those of you who are the people who have the trees in your house with the decorating and the guy with the beard and the chimney, you don't have to know why he started doing it or care where it came from. All you care about is end result. The fact that you get to lose points every time you yell at a teacher, that's all you really care about. It's a holiday every day for me. So that's how traditions work. The fact that you don't have to know why they started or why they're going on, just the fact that they happen. That plays a really important role in our story. Because at some point in this story, you're going to do the whole table flip and go, why? And you're going to yell at me. And I'm going to go, hey, do you remember? I just sound like Elmo. It's because I'm sick and my voice changed. When we have that moment, when you guys get all ragey at me, I'm referring back to this moment, and I'll say, remember conversation, because it's important. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, I'm ignoring you.
Sesame Street is quaking.
When you ask lots of questions, I tend to ignore you more often. You get limited to only 12 a day.
But it's okay to have questions because that just means you want to learn.
No. Other teachers have lied to you with that. I apologize. Up here, the things to hit. These are all things that are going to pop up as we get into our last story. It kind of wraps up all those things together. Once again, what is irony?
Opposite of what you expect.
So, the opposite of what you expect to have happen to you.
Sarcasm.
I know. I'm a horrible person. I can't sleep at night. What's foreshadowing?
Oh, foreshadowing is losing the story to help you figure out the ending. Pumpkin.
So, in our story, there's going to be... Now, unlike with previous ones, like with the landlady where you had to use the foreshadowing to solve the ending, this one, it has an ending. You have to have the foreshadowing to figure out why that ending happens. It's not a hitting ending. It comes right out and punches you in the face. But you're like, why did you just punch me in the face?
Will you help
And
us?
that's where the foreshadowing comes back. And where I use the foreshadowing and go, oh, now I know why you punched me in the face. I'm like, yes. And it was fun. So the foreshadowing plays a big role, but a different reason. And then suspense. You guys just covered that one. That plays our big role in it too. And then, exposition. The problem with our story is that there's exposition to this one. Our story pretty much has only 3 parts to it. Exposition, rising action, climax. And that's the whole story as we go through. There's a lot of exposition, and then all of a sudden when we get to rising action, if you can imagine you're in a car, and someone goes, what's this pedal do? They just push it down all the way. You're like, it's just that way until you get to the end, and then it just stops with someone going, boom, right in the face, and then it ends. And you're like, that was a thrill ride. I'm like, you're welcome. So that's our story of the lottery.
Okay.
Or I'm lying to you, and it's a completely boring story that I'm trying to build up. Because that would be hilarious. All right. By the way, if you don't know what a lottery is, because that's the title of our story, the lottery.
Such a sad movie.
So the best reference I can give nowadays is with Hunger Games, because that's a lottery. Because almost everybody thinks of a lottery with the whole picking of the numbers and the people winning and stuff like that. Not all lotteries deal with someone picking a number and winning money. There are other types of lotteries. A lottery is just a random. I do a lottery in my class every week.
Tie game.
The tie game is a type of lottery where you're putting in the, do I get picked? Do I get picked? I don't get picked because I'm not smart. And so you're going to put that stuff in the same type of lottery. The Hunger Games, that was a type of lottery where they're pulling it out. No one wanted to win that lottery. Yeah, some lotteries are bad, some lotteries are good, but it's a random chance of winning one thing or another. So it's that same idea. That's a lottery. All right, now taking a look here. Emerton?
Technically, 3 districts wanted to be picked. Like
True, because they like to compete against you, because they like the killing of kids. I mean, right? It's the other ones that have more issues with this.
Why do you hate us?
So, I don't hate all of you, just some of you.
You don't like Jordan. Me?
So,
Why not
what?
you?
No, I didn't say your name out loud.
I missed him.
So now with the...
I feel so disliked and unwanted.
Stop, you're just making me giggle more. With the lottery, we'll take a look and we're going to, as we get into it, you're going to figure out all the boring background stuff. Characters, where's the place, what's happening, and stuff like that. The morning of June 27th was clear and sunny, with the fresh warmth of a full summer day. The flowers were blossoming profusely, and the grass was richly green. The people of the village began to gather in the square between the post office and the bank around 10 o'clock. In some towns, there were so many people that the lottery took 2 days and had to be started on June 26th. But in this village, where there were only about 300 people, the whole lottery took less than 2 hours. So it could begin at 10 o'clock in the morning and still be through in time to allow the villagers to get home for noon dinner. So, quick pause.
What?
When is our story taking place?
June 27th.
There you go.
In the summer.
Around what time?
June 27th at 10
o'clock
in the
There
morning.
you go. Where is it taking place?
A village.
In a village. And how big is the village?
300 people.
So you have an idea of how big the village is. When it says 300 people, in our school, we have 1,000. So there's more people in our school than this village. In 7th grade, we have about 500. So once again, our 7th grade outnumbers this village. In our lunch cafeteria, we're around 315, 320. So if we were to have a rumble between our lunch cap, just one, like lunch A, versus this village, we would outnumber them. Now, they'd probably still win because look at all y'all. But still, numbering-wise, it gives you an idea of how big the entire village is.
I could beat up.
All right. The children assembled first, of course. School was recently over for the summer, and the feeling of liberty sat uneasily on most of them. They tended to gather together quietly for a while before they broke into boisterous play, and their talk was still of the classroom and the teacher, of books and reprimands. A reprimand is when a teacher yells at you and says, like, you're a bad kid, don't do a thing. That's being reprimanded. It's a fancy word for discipline. No. Bobby Martin had already stuffed his pockets full of stones, and the other boys soon followed his example, selecting the smoothest and roundest stones. Bobby and Harry Jones and Dickie Delacroix, the villagers pronounced this name Delacroix, eventually made a great pile of stones in one corner of the square and guarded it against the raids of the other boys. The girls stood aside, talking amongst themselves, looking over their shoulders at the boys. The very small children rolled in the dust or clung to the hands of their older brothers or sisters. Another quick pause as we go through our wonderful exposition. So they're all gathering together for the lottery. What is it the boys are doing?
They're collecting stones.
Doing what boys do, collecting rocks because boys. Now, before you start making fun of the boys, what is it the girls are doing?
Staring at the boys.
Yeah. They're checking out the boys who are picking out rocks. So I don't know which is worse, being the ones going, ooh, rocks, or being the one going, look at them boys checking out them rocks. So they both have their own issues. It's just, right. Thank you. I practice at home. And then, what is it the small children are doing?
Rolling in dust.
And then, of course, you have the little kids who are just like rolling in the dirt like, it's dirt, and having a good time. So as the lottery gets ready to begin, the kids are doing kiddish things. Soon, the men began to gather, surveying their own children, speaking of planting and rain, tractors and taxes. They stood together, away from the pile of stones in the corner, and their jokes were quiet, and they smiled rather than laughed. The women, wearing faded house dresses and sweaters, came shortly after their menfolk. They greeted one another and exchanged bits of gossip as they went to join their husbands. Soon, the women, standing by their husbands, began to call to their children, and the children came reluctantly, having to be called 4 or 5 times. Bobby Martin ducked under his mother's grasping hand and ran, laughing, back to the pile of stones. His father spoke up sharply, and Bobby came quickly and took his place between his father and his oldest brother. As we move forward from here, what I'm going to have you do is pay attention to tone. As far as how is the mood of all the people who are there, what is the atmosphere like and stuff like that as they're preparing for this lottery thing to happen. Quickly.
Pretty depressing.
Well, not there. I have to keep going there. So some people are already feeling depressing, but it might be because there's children involved. I feel the same way. But as it goes forward, sort of pick up on that. Awful.
So, their parents are looking on the children as the boys pick up rocks and are okay with their children just being awed by the fact that there's.
I've been around small boys before too, and it's, after a while you're just like, yeah, they just like to have issues. You just accept these things. The lottery was conducted, as were the square dances, the teen club, and the Halloween program by Mr. Summers, who had time and energy to devote to civic activities. He was a round-faced, jovial man, and he ran the coal business. People were sorry for him because he had no children, and his wife was a scold. When it says that his wife was a scold, do you know what it means to scold somebody?
Mean.
It's when you yell at them, like, go clean your room, don't be a bad kid. And so instead of using it as a verb, they're using it as a noun, which means that she does it so often, that's just what she is. She does it all the time. She's like, what's wrong with you? Why does no one like you? Come on, why are your shoes tied? What's wrong with you? And so that's what she just does nonstop. So his wife is not the most pleasant of people. Macy.
Is it ironic that his name is Mr. Summers and he's doing a Halloween party?
A little bit, yeah. Nicely done. Let's see. Skull. When he arrived in the square, carrying the black wooden box, there was a murmur of conversation among the villagers. And he waved and called, "A little late today, folks." The postmaster, Mr. Graves, followed him, carrying a three-legged stool. And the stool was put in the center of the square, and Mr. Summers set the black box down on it. The villagers kept their distance, leaving a space between themselves and the stool. And when Mr. Summers said, "Hey, can some of you fellows want to give me a hand?" there was a hesitation before two men, Mr. Martin and his oldest son Baxter, came forward to hold the box steady on the stool while Mr. Summers stirred up the papers inside of it. Quick pause. We find out what we're going to use for the lottery. And what is our lottery device?
Paper.
A box. Sorry. On a stool. And so they bring out a three-legged stool and they put a box on top of it. And then what's inside the box? I know. It only gets more exciting from here. Mr. Broviak, you're right. This is nonstop. So this is where we get the fact there's paper inside a box on top of a stool. It's okay if you need to hold on to your chair. The original paraphernalia for the lottery had been lost long ago. And the black box, now resting on the stool, had been put into use even before Old Man Warner, the oldest man, and by the way, that's a great name. I hope to have that name myself someday. Old Man Warner, the oldest man in town, was born. Mr. Summers spoke frequently to the villagers about making a new box, but no one liked to upset even as much tradition as was represented by the black box. There was a story that the present box had been made with some pieces of the box that had preceded it, the one that had been constructed when the first people settled down to make a village here. Every year, after the lottery, Mr. Summers began talking again about a new box. But every year the subject was allowed to fade off without anything being done. The black box grew shabbier each year. By now, it was no longer completely black, but splintered badly along one side to show the original wood color, and in some places, faded or stained. It's going to play a somewhat important role. How long have they been using this box?
A long time.
Forever. Longer than Old Man Warner, whose name was Old Man, which means his childhood was probably pretty rough. So this box has been around for a long time. So remember, if they've been using the box for a long time, the lottery's been happening a long time. Mr. Martin and his oldest son Baxter held the black box securely on the stool until Mr. Summers had stirred the papers thoroughly with his hand. Because so much of the ritual had been forgotten or discarded, Mr. Summers had been successful in having slips of paper substituted for the chips of wood that had been used for generations. Chips of wood, Mr. Summers had argued, had been all very well when the village was tiny. But now that the population was more than 300 and likely to keep on growing, it was necessary to use something that would fit more easily into the black box. The night before the lottery, Mr. Summers and Mr. Graves made up the slips of paper and put them in the box. And it was then taken to the safe of Mr. Summers' coal company and locked up until Mr. Summers was ready to take it to the square the next morning. The rest of the year, the box was put away. Sometimes one place, sometimes another. It spent 1 year in Mr. Graves' barn and another year underfoot in the post office. And sometimes it was set on a shelf at the market grocery, just left there. So before we used paper, what did we use prior to that?
Wood chips.
So they used to have my wood chips up there? I did not have my wood chips. Before that we used wood chips. Why did they have to stop using wood chips?
Because there are too many people.
The town is humongous because now there's 300 people and they're like, wood chips is ridiculous. So now we're going to use smashed wood chips called paper. And so now they're going to use paper. Do we know what's on the paper yet?
No.
Not yet. All right. So we don't know there's paper and there's going to be something on paper and then eventually that's what we find out. And we stir it. Great deal of fussing. We got to that part. No, okay. All right. There was a great deal of fussing to be done before Mr. Summers declared the lottery open. There were the lists to make up of heads of families, heads of households in each family, members of each household in each family. There was the proper swearing in of Mr. Summers by the postmaster as the official of the lottery. At one time, some people remembered there had been a speech of some sort performed by the official of the lottery, a boring, tuneless chant that had been rattled off duly each year. Some people believe that the official of the lottery used to stand just so when he said or sang it. Others believe that he was supposed to walk among the people. But years and years ago, this part of the ritual had been allowed to lapse. There had been also a ritual salute, which the official of the lottery had had to use in addressing each person who came up to draw from the box. But this also had changed with time, until now it was felt necessary only for the official to speak to each person approaching. Mr. Summers was very good at all this, in his clean white shirt and blue jeans with one hand resting carelessly on the black box. He seemed very proper and important as he talked interminably to Mr. Graves and the Martins. Two things. One, has their process of doing the lottery changed or stayed the same?
Changed.
And so they've been doing it for so long, it's changed over the years, and all of this, although it seems like boring exposition now, when we get to climaxy bit, this all goes back and becomes really, really important. And so all this dragging out of stuff, the things they're explaining, makes sense when we get to the very end. And then also tone. Have you picked up on any particular tone throughout all this as far as the townspeople, as far as exciting, not exciting? Keep paying attention to that as the story continues. Keep looking for some of our foreshadowing clues as far as how the villagers are reacting to it as we get into it. All right, we are now done with exposition, moving into the next stage. Just as Mr. Summers finally left off talking and turned to the assembled villagers, Mrs. Hutchinson came hurriedly along the path to the square, her sweater thrown over her shoulders. And there we stop.
Wow.
Tomorrow we will pick up from there and keep on going. Just in case you're one of my cheater kids, I did not give you the end of the story because I do not trust you.
Wait, what?
So if you try to read the end of it, it's not on there.
Oh, so that's why it cut
Yeah, because I don't trust you, horrible cheating children.
out.